I stood there, holding a simple wrapped box at my daughter's first birthday party, while my sister-in-law Sarah laughed in my face. "Really, Emma? That's all you could afford," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. My husband's entire family snickered. They had no idea what was actually inside that box. And when my daughter Lily finally opened her gift, the room went dead silent. Because what I gave her that day wasn't just a present, it was the key to her entire future. And it destroyed my in-laws in the process. What happened next made my husband cut ties with his own parents right there in front of 50 guests. And the truth? They deserved every second of it. My name is Emma Carter, and I married into what I thought was a loving family. I was wrong. Dead wrong. My husband, David, came from money. Old money. The kind that buys lake houses in 3 states and country club memberships that have waiting lists longer than college applications. His parents, Richard and Margaret, owned a successful real estate development company in Charlotte, North Carolina. They didn't just have money, they had wealth. The big house with the circular driveway and the fountain. The luxury cars that got replaced every 2 years. The vacation properties in Hilton Head and Asheville. Everything about them screamed status, power, and superiority. I, on the other hand, came from a working-class background. My parents were teachers. My dad, Thomas, taught high school history for 35 years. My mom, Linda, taught elementary school for 28 years. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in a middle-class neighborhood. We took vacations to state parks, not Europe. We shopped at Target, not Nordstrom. But we had something the Carters never had: genuine love, unshakable integrity, and a family bond that didn't depend on net worth. That was my inheritance. That was my foundation. When David and I started dating 6 years ago, his family was polite but distant. Painfully distant. I could feel their judgment radiating off them like heat from asphalt in July. I wasn't from their world. I didn't summer in the Hamptons. I didn't have a trust fund or family connections to Fortune 500 companies. My last name didn't open doors. And in their world, that made me nobody. But David loved me. He saw past all the superficial bullshit his family valued. He saw me. The girl who worked 2 jobs to put herself through college. The girl who volunteered at animal shelters on weekends. The girl who loved classic movies and made terrible puns and wasn't afraid to be herself. That was supposed to be enough. We got married 4 years ago in a beautiful ceremony that his parents barely contributed to financially, despite sitting on millions. They claimed they were teaching us responsibility and letting us build our own life. Meanwhile, they'd paid for David's older brother Jake's entire wedding 2 years earlier, and I mean entire. Ice sculptures. Open bar with top-shelf everything. A 7-piece band. Destination bachelor party in Cabo San Lucas. The wedding alone cost north of $80,000. Ours? We scraped together $15,000 and did most of it ourselves. The double standard was glaring, offensive, and deliberate. But I bit my tongue. I smiled through gritted teeth. I played the role of the grateful daughter-in-law because I loved David and I wanted to make it work. Then I got pregnant with Lily. You'd think becoming grandparents would soften them, right? Wrong. It got worse. Margaret made passive-aggressive comments throughout my entire pregnancy that cut like razors wrapped in silk. Are you sure you can afford a baby right now? Daycare is so expensive, Emma. Have you actually run the numbers? I hope you're not expecting us to be free babysitters. Richard and I have very full schedules. You know, Jake and Sarah are waiting until they're more financially stable. That's the responsible choice. Every comment was designed to remind me that I wasn't good enough. That I was reckless. That I was dragging their precious son down into poverty. David defended me sometimes, but mostly he just wanted to keep the peace. That's just how they are, he'd say, making excuses. They don't mean anything by it. It's just their way. But they did mean it. Every single word. Let me paint you a picture of just how bad it got. When I was 7 months pregnant, we had a family dinner at Richard and Margaret's house. I was exhausted, swollen, and uncomfortable. I'd worked a full day at my job as a marketing coordinator, and all I wanted was a quiet meal. Margaret had made her famous prime rib, a meal she knew I couldn't eat because I'd developed an aversion to red meat during pregnancy. When I politely declined and asked if there was chicken or fish, she sighed dramatically. Emma, I spent 3 hours preparing this meal. I didn't realize I was supposed to cater to your condition. Your condition. Like pregnancy was some kind of inconvenient disease. Sarah, who'd been married to Jake for 3 years at that point, chimed in. When I decide to have kids, I'm definitely not going to let it affect family gatherings. You have to stay social and flexible. She said this while sipping wine and running her hand over her flat stomach like it was some kind of achievement. I excused myself to the bathroom and cried. David found me 10 minutes later and promised we'd leave early. But we stayed another 2 hours because he didn't want to make a scene. That was the pattern. They'd hurt me. David would apologize for them. And we'd keep showing up because family is important. When Lily was born on a freezing January morning, she was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a head full of dark hair just like David's, and these bright, alert eyes that seemed to take in everything. I fell in love so hard it physically hurt. David cried when he held her. It was the most beautiful, pure moment of my entire life. Richard and Margaret came to the hospital, but their visit was performative and brief. Margaret held Lily for maybe 5 minutes, commented that she looked a bit jaundiced, she wasn't, critiqued the name we'd chosen, Lily is so common now, everyone's using it, and then they left. We have a board meeting, Richard said, checking his Rolex. A board meeting. On the day their granddaughter was born. In the months that followed, they saw Lily maybe once a month, if that. But they posted constantly on Facebook about being blessed grandparents and #GrandpaLife. They insisted on professional photo sessions with Lily, photos they paid for and they controlled. They'd show up, take her for an hour, get their Instagram-worthy shots, and then hand her back. It was all for show. All for their image. Also, their friends at the country club could see what devoted grandparents they were. But here's what they didn't know. What none of them knew. While they were busy judging me and treating me like I wasn't good enough for their family, I was building something. Something they'd never see coming. Something that would blow their minds and expose them for exactly who they were. My parents had passed away in a car accident 3 years before Lily was born. A drunk driver ran a red light and hit them broadside. They died instantly. It was the worst, most devastating period of my life. I was 26 years old, planning a wedding, and suddenly I was an orphan. No siblings. No extended family. Just me. But they left me something. A modest inheritance from their life insurance, retirement savings, and the sale of their house. After everything was settled, it came to $215,000. It wasn't millions. It wasn't even close to what the Carters considered real money. But it was everything my parents had worked for their entire lives. Every sacrificed vacation. Every skipped luxury. Every penny saved. It represented 63 combined years of teaching, of shaping young minds, of believing in the future. Most people told me to use it for a down payment on a house. My financial advisor suggested diversifying it into stocks and bonds. David thought we should use some of it to pay off my student loans. All reasonable suggestions. But I had a different plan. A plan I didn't tell anyone about. Not even David. Especially not David, because I knew he'd tell his parents. And they didn't deserve to know. This was from MY family to MY daughter. This was sacred. See, my parents always told me, education is the one thing no one can take from you. Not a recession. Not a divorce. Not bad luck. Knowledge is permanent. My dad had been a teacher for 35 years. He'd had students come back decades later to thank him for changing their lives, for believing in them, for pushing them to go to college when their own parents hadn't. My mom had a wall in her classroom covered in letters from former students who'd become doctors, lawyers, engineers, teachers themselves. They believed in the transformative power of education with a religious fervor. So I took that entire inheritance, every single dollar, and put it into a trust fund for Lily. A trust fund that would mature when she turned 18. A fund specifically designated for education expenses, college tuition, graduate school, study abroad programs, books, housing, whatever she needed to pursue her dreams without the crushing weight of student debt. I worked with a financial advisor I found independently, someone who had no connection to David's family. We set it up properly, legally, with ironclad terms. The money was invested conservatively but intelligently: index funds, bonds, some growth stocks, all balanced for long-term appreciation. By the time Lily turned 18, that fund would be worth approximately $600,000, possibly more depending on market performance over 17 years. $600,000. For education. For freedom. For choices that money could buy. I put everything in writing. I wrote Lily a letter explaining where the money came from, who my parents were, what they believed in. I included photos of them, copies of letters from their former students, their college diplomas. I wanted her to know that this gift wasn't just money, it was a legacy. It was love reaching forward through time from grandparents she'd never meet. The only person who knew was my best friend Rachel, and only because she was listed as the backup trustee in case something happened to me. She was sworn to absolute secrecy. "This is incredible," she'd said when I showed her the paperwork. "Emma, do you realize what you've just done? You've given her a future." Yes, I did realize. That was the point. As Lily's first birthday approached, Margaret insisted on throwing her a party. Not asked. Not suggested. Insisted. "We'll host it at the house," she announced over Sunday brunch. It wasn't a question. It was a declaration. "I've already contacted a party planner. This is going to be an event. All of our friends want to meet Lily properly." I wanted to protest. I wanted Lily's first birthday to be intimate, just close family, maybe a few friends, a simple cake, some balloons. But David convinced me to let them do it. "It'll make them happy," he said. "And, honestly, it's less work for us. Let them throw money at it." So I agreed. Biggest mistake I could have made. The party was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon in late January. Margaret went absolutely insane with the planning. She hired a company that specialized in luxury children's events. When David and I showed up the morning of the party to help set up, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was a balloon arch at the entrance of their circular driveway, custom gold and blush pink balloons with Lily's first birthday spelled out in giant gold letters. There were caterers setting up stations with gourmet appetizers, crab cakes, prosciutto-wrapped asparagus, artisanal cheese boards. For a one-year-old's birthday party, there was a dessert table that looked like something from a royal wedding, a 3-tier custom cake, macarons, cake pops, chocolate-covered strawberries, all coordinated in pink and gold. There was a professional photographer with an assistant, setting up lighting equipment. There was a live violinist in the corner playing classical music. There were custom invitations that had cost $8 each. There were party favors for guests, luxury candles and custom boxes with Lily's name on them. Margaret had rented furniture. Rented. Furniture. Velvet chairs and gold-rimmed tables. The whole thing probably cost $15,000. For a party for a baby who would have been just as happy with a cupcake and a cardboard box. But the most ridiculous thing? The gift table. Margaret had set up an entire staged area near the entrance, with a custom backdrop where guests could place their presents. It was like an Instagram photo op. Everything was wrapped in coordinating colors of blush pink and gold. Very aesthetic. Very on brand. Very calculated for maximum social media impact. "Isn't this wonderful?" Margaret said, her arms spread wide. "Everyone's going to remember this." Oh. They'd remember it all right. Just not for the reasons she thought. David's entire extended family came. Aunts, uncles, cousins, second cousins, family friends, Richard and Margaret's business associates, people from their country club. At least 50 people. For a 1-year-old's birthday. It was less of a party and more of a social networking event. A performance. A display of wealth and status. And I was just a prop in their carefully curated show. I arrived with David and Lily, and immediately I felt like I'd shown up to the wrong event. I was wearing a simple floral sundress from Target and sandals. Everyone else looked like they were attending a garden party at the governor's mansion. The women were in designer dresses with expensive jewelry. The men wore blazers and loafers. Sarah was wearing head-to-toe designer, a cream-colored dress I later found out was Zimmerman, which retails for about $800. Her shoes were Valentino. Her bag was Gucci. She looked like she'd stepped out of Vogue. "Oh, Emma," Margaret said when she saw me, her smile tight and her eyes cold. "I wish you'd told me you needed help picking out an outfit. I would have taken you shopping. This is a rather important event." The way she said important made it clear she thought I'd embarrassed her by showing up looking like a normal human being. Strike one. The party went on and everyone fawned over Lily. At least she was getting attention. She looked adorable in the custom dress Margaret had bought her, without asking me, pink tulle with gold embroidery, probably $200 for something she'd wear once and spit up on. I tried to enjoy myself, tried to mingle, but every conversation felt like an interrogation. "So, Emma, what do you do?" one of Margaret's friends asked. "I'm a marketing coordinator at a tech startup." "Oh, how modern." Translation: how unimpressive. "And where did you go to school?" "State University." A polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. Translation: not Ivy League, doesn't count. I spent most of the party standing on the edges, holding Lily, feeling like an outsider. These weren't my people. This wasn't my scene. This was a performance I hadn't auditioned for and didn't want to roll in. Then came time for presents. Margaret gathered everyone around, positioning herself at the center like a ringmaster. The photographer moved into position, camera ready for the perfect shots. The gift table was overflowing. Designer baby clothes with tags still attached showing prices that made my stomach turn. High-end educational toys. A custom rocking horse that looked like it belonged in a museum. And then Richard and Margaret presented their gift with maximum fanfare. They had David bring it in from the garage. It was a miniature Mercedes G-Wagon. An electric, ride-on car. For a 1-year-old who couldn't even walk yet. The thing cost $1,200. I'd looked it up online when Margaret mentioned she was thinking of getting it. Everyone applauded. The photographer captured Margaret and Richard posed with Lily and the tiny Mercedes. "Only the best for our granddaughter," Richard announced proudly. I watched as David's family presented their extravagant gifts, each one trying to outdo the last. Aunt Patricia gave a custom-made dollhouse that was a replica of the Carter family estate, complete with miniature furniture. It cost $3,000. She announced the price. Out loud. Uncle Tom presented a collection of first-edition children's books in a glass display case, collectibles, not meant to be read, just displayed. David's cousin Bradley gave Lily a baby Rolex. An actual, functioning Rolex watch sized for an infant. Who does that? It was absurd. It was grotesque. It was a competition where everyone was trying to prove their worth through their wallet size. And Lily, the supposed guest of honor, was crying because she was overwhelmed and tired and just wanted a nap. Then Sarah noticed my gift. It was sitting on the edge of the table, wrapped in simple cream-colored paper with a champagne-colored satin ribbon. No glitter. No gold foil. No designer gift bag. Just clean, elegant, understated. Sarah picked it up, felt the weight, and smirked. "What's this, Emma? Did you wrap up a book?" Her voice carried across the room. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Everyone was looking at me. My face flushed hot. My heart pounded. But I kept my voice steady. "It's something special for Lily." "I'm sure it is," Sarah said, her tone dripping with condescension. She shook the box theatrically, holding it up to her ear. "Feels light." "What is it, a savings bond?" "One of those cute little piggy banks." A few people chuckled. Margaret smiled that tight, cruel smile. Richard was checking his phone, barely paying attention, but even he glanced up with an expression of mild amusement. I could feel David tense next to me, finally picking up on the hostility. But before he could say anything, I spoke. "Why don't we open it and see?" "Oh, I think we'll save the best for last," Margaret said, her voice saccharine. She gestured to the mountain of expensive gifts. "Let's start with these impressive presents, shall we? I want to make sure we get good photos of everything." Translation: let's embarrass Emma last, after everyone's seen what real gifts look like. For the next 45 excruciating minutes, I watched as Lily, who was more interested in ripping wrapping paper than the actual gifts, unwrapped present after present. Everyone oohed and awed at the appropriate moments. Margaret narrated each gift for the photographer. "This is from the Hendersons. They're such dear friends. This is from Patricia. Isn't she generous? This is from our country club. They just adore Lily." It was performative. It was nauseating. And I was counting down the seconds until my gift would finally be opened and I could leave. Then, finally, Margaret picked up my gift. The room had that exhausted energy of a party that's gone on too long. Kids were cranky. Adults were ready for another drink. But Margaret, ever the showman, rallied everyone's attention. "And now," she said with exaggerated enthusiasm, "let's see what Emma got for our darling Lily." Her tone was patronizing, like a kindergarten teacher humoring a child who'd brought in a pine cone for show and tell. She handed the box to David. "Why don't you open it, sweetheart? I'm sure it's very thoughtful." David sat next to me, Lily on his lap, already exhausted and rubbing her eyes. He started to unwrap it carefully, respecting the simplicity of the wrapping. Inside was a wooden box, handcrafted from cherry wood, with Lily's full name, Lily and Carter, engraved on the top in beautiful script. The box itself was a work of art, made by a local woodworker I'd commissioned specifically for this. It had taken him 2 months to create. David opened the box. Inside was a cream-colored envelope with a wax seal and a folder containing official documents. The room quieted. Something about the formality of the presentation shifted the energy. David opened the envelope and pulled out a letter, 3 pages, handwritten in my careful script. He started reading aloud, his voice uncertain at first. "Dear Lily," he read, "today you turn 1 year old, and though you won't understand this now, someday you will. I want you to know how much you are loved. How much you've always been loved, even before you were born." The room grew quieter. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Margaret's smile faltered slightly. David continued. "Your grandparents, my parents, Thomas and Linda, never got to meet you. They died 3 years before you were born. But they loved you anyway, because they loved me, and they would have loved you with everything they had. They were teachers. Your grandfather taught history for 35 years. Your grandmother taught 2nd grade for 28 years. They didn't have money. They didn't have status. But they had something more important. They had purpose. They believed that education was the greatest gift anyone could receive. That knowledge could change lives. That learning could open doors that money alone never could." David's voice caught. His hands were shaking. He looked at me, confusion and emotion swirling in his eyes, but I nodded for him to keep reading. "So, on your 1st birthday, I'm giving you their final gift. I've taken the inheritance they left me, everything they worked their entire lives to save, and established a trust fund in your name. This fund is specifically designated for your education. College, graduate school, study abroad. Whatever path you choose, wherever your dreams take you, you'll have the freedom to pursue them without the burden of debt, without having to choose a path based on money instead of passion." David stopped. His eyes scanned ahead on the page, and I saw his face go pale. He looked at me, his voice barely a whisper. "Emma, how much?" "Keep reading," I said softly. He swallowed hard and continued. "By the time you turn 18, this trust fund will be worth over $600,000. Maybe more. That's not a guess. That's a conservative estimate based on the current investment strategy. It's real. It's protected. It's yours. The silence in the room was deafening. You could hear the violinist's bow scraping across strings in the corner. You could hear ice shifting in glasses. You could hear someone's stomach actually gurgle. David's hands trembled as he pulled out the documents from the folder. Official paperwork. Trust fund documentation from a major financial institution. Lily's full name. The dollar amount. The terms. The investment strategy. The trustee information. Everything legal, binding, and undeniable. He stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. Then he looked at me, tears streaming down his face. You used your entire inheritance? Everything your parents left you. I nodded, my own tears falling freely now. Yes, but why didn't you tell me? Because this was from my family to our daughter. This was my parents speaking to their granddaughter from beyond the grave. This was their legacy, and I wanted it to be pure, untouched by anyone else's opinions or expectations. The room remained frozen. Sarah's mouth hung open. Margaret had gone completely white. Richard had actually put his phone down and was staring at the documents in David's hands. David looked at his parents, then at his brother, then at Sarah, then back at me. And something in him just broke. Or maybe it was the opposite. Maybe something in him finally solidified. David stood up, still holding Lily, still holding the documents. His voice when he spoke was louder than I'd ever heard it. Strong. Certain. Furious. This, he said, holding up the trust fund paperwork, this is worth more than everything on that table combined. Hell, it's worth more than everything in this house. Emma gave our daughter a future. She gave her freedom. Security. Options. What did you give her, Mom? What did you give her, Dad? A $1,200 car she can't drive for 5 years? A watch she can't wear? A dollhouse worth more than most people's monthly rent. Margaret's face flushed red. David, that's not fair. Not fair. David's voice cracked like thunder. You want to talk about what's not fair? What's not fair is how you've treated Emma since the day I brought her home. The comments. The judgment. The constant reminders that she's not from your world, that she doesn't have the right pedigree, that she's somehow dragging me down. What's not fair is that you paid for Jake's entire wedding, but made us scrape together our own because you were teaching us responsibility. What's not fair is that you gave Jake a down payment for his house, but didn't offer us a dime. What's not fair is that when Emma was pregnant, carrying your granddaughter, you made comments about whether we could afford a baby. Richard stood up, his jaw tight, his CEO voice coming out. David, I think you're overreacting. Am I? David shot back. Let me ask you something, Dad. How much is Jake's trust fund worth? The one you set up for him when he was born? Ballpark. Richard's silence was damning. That's what I thought, David said. And mine? Oh wait, I don't have one. Because you decided to let me make my own way. Funny how those rules only applied to me. Jake stood up, his face red. That's not. Shut up, Jake, David said coldly. You've had everything handed to you your entire life and you've never once questioned it. You married Sarah, whose family is as wealthy as ours, so you just moved from one bubble to another. You have no idea what it's like to actually work for something. To sacrifice. To build something from nothing. He turned back to Margaret, and his voice dropped lower, colder. Emma comes from teachers. Working people. People who dedicated their lives to helping others, to building futures for kids who had nothing. Her parents drove used cars and lived in a modest house and took one vacation every 3 years to a state park. And when they died, they left her everything they'd managed to save. $215,000. That was their entire legacy. 63 combined years of work, and that's what they had to show for it. Margaret tried to speak. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, David interrupted. You looked at Emma and saw someone who wasn't good enough. Someone who didn't shop at the right stores or go to the right schools or have the right last name. And you've spent 4 years making her feel small. Making her feel like she doesn't belong. making her apologize for who she is. He looked down at the documents in his hand, then back up at his mother. Well, guess what? She's better than all of us. While you were buying things to impress your friends, Emma was building something that actually matters. She took everything her parents left her, everything, and gave it to our daughter. Not for show. Not for status. For her future. That's love. That's sacrifice. That's what family is supposed to be. Sarah, desperate to deflect attention from the family crisis unfolding, laughed nervously. Okay, but let's be real. 600,000 sounds impressive, but with inflation, college costs rising, that might not even cover. Are you seriously doing math right now? Rachel, my best friend who'd been quietly standing in the corner, stepped forward. Are you seriously trying to diminish what Emma just did? She gave her daughter everything. Not just money. A legacy. A promise. A future built on love. And you're over here calculating whether it's enough. Sarah's face went red. I was just saying. We all know what you were saying, Rachel cut her off. We've all been watching you and Margaret and the rest of this family treat Emma like garbage for years. And now she's shown you what real wealth looks like, what real class looks like, and you can't handle it. Aunt Patricia tried to restore order. Everyone, please. This is supposed to be a celebration. Of what? David asked. Lily's birthday, or your ability to outspend each other. Because from where I'm standing, this party hasn't been about Lily at all. It's been about everyone showing off. Performing. Proving their worth by the size of their gift receipt. Uncle Tom cleared his throat. David, I think you're upset and saying things you don't mean. I mean every word, David said. For years, I've made excuses for this family. I've told Emma that you don't mean it, that it's just your way, that family is complicated. But the truth? You're bullies. Elitist bullies who measure people by their bank accounts and their zip codes. And I'm done. I'm done apologizing for you. I'm done subjecting my wife to your cruelty. And I'm done pretending this is normal. He handed Lily to me and turned back to his parents one final time. When you're ready to treat Emma with the respect she deserves, the respect she's always deserved, you know where to find us. But until then, we won't be attending any more of these performances. Come on, Emma. We're leaving. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of embarrassment, of wounded pride, of being called out publicly in front of everyone who mattered to her. You can't just leave, she said, her voice breaking. What will people think? That's all you care about, isn't it? David said quietly. What people think? Well, here's what I think. I think Emma is the best thing that ever happened to me. I think our daughter is lucky to have a mother who puts her future ahead of everything else. And I think this family has a lot of soul-searching to do. And with that, we left. David took Lily from me so I could walk without stumbling. We walked out of that mansion, past the balloon arch, past the gift table full of expensive things that suddenly looked hollow and meaningless. We walked past the caterers and the photographer and the violinist. We walked past the luxury cars in the driveway. We put Lily in her car seat, and as David started the car, I looked back at the house. Through the window, I could see people standing frozen, drinks in hands, unsure what to do. Margaret was sitting down, her head in her hands. Richard was on his phone, probably calling his attorney or his therapist or whoever rich people call when their carefully constructed image cracks. We drove home in silence. Not an angry silence. A peaceful one. Like we'd finally exhaled after holding our breath for 4 years. When we got home, David carried a sleeping Lily inside and put her in her crib. Then he came back to the living room where I was sitting on the couch, still processing everything that had happened. He sat next to me, took my hand, and broke down. I'm sorry, he sobbed. I'm so sorry I didn't stand up for you sooner. I'm sorry I made excuses for them. I'm sorry I let you suffer through years of their judgment and cruelty. You deserved better. You deserve better. And I failed you. I pulled him close. We're going to be okay, I whispered. We have each other. We have Lily. And now she has a future that no one can take away. You gave away everything, he said, his voice muffled against my shoulder. Your parents' entire legacy. You could have bought a house. You could have. I did what my parents would have wanted, I said firmly. They didn't leave me money to buy things. They left me a legacy to pass on. And that's exactly what I did. The days after the party were chaos. Margaret called 50 times. I didn't answer. Richard sent emails demanding we discuss this like adults. David ignored them. Sarah posted a vague Facebook status about ungrateful family members who don't appreciate generosity that got absolutely dragged in the comments by mutual friends who'd witnessed the party. She deleted it within 2 hours. Jake tried to be the mediator, calling David repeatedly. Mom's devastated. Dad's furious. You embarrassed them in front of everyone. David's response was simple, good. They've been embarrassing Emma for years. Now they know how it feels. But the aftermath wasn't just about his family's meltdown. It was about us, David and me, finally having the honest conversations we should have had years ago. He opened up about the pressure he'd felt his entire life to live up to his family's expectations. About how he'd watched them favor Jake from childhood and excuse it as birth order dynamics. About how he'd been terrified to rock the boat because he didn't want to lose them. But I already lost them, he said one night as we put Lily to bed. They were never really there. Not the way your parents were for you. Not the way we're going to be for Lily. We went to couples therapy. We talked about boundaries, about values, about what kind of family we wanted to build. We talked about money and status and what actually matters in life. And slowly, things started to shift. It took 3 months, but eventually Margaret reached out with an actual apology. Not a sorry you felt that way non-apology. Not a sorry but you overreacted deflection. A real apology. She came to our apartment, not invited, just showed up. David almost closed the door in her face, but I stopped him. Let her talk, I said. We sat in our small living room, and Margaret looked around at our modest furniture, our Target throw pillows, our IKEA bookshelves. And maybe for the first time, she actually saw us. Not the image she'd constructed in her head, but the real us. I've been a terrible mother-in-law, she said, her voice shaking. And worse, I've been a terrible person. I judged you, Emma, from the moment I met you. Not because of who you were, but because of who you weren't. You didn't fit the image I had in my head of who David should marry. And instead of getting to know you, instead of appreciating you, I punished you for being different. She wiped tears from her eyes. When you opened that gift at the party, when David read that letter, I realized something. You have more class, more grace, more genuine love than I've shown in my entire life. You sacrificed everything for Lily's future. And I've been so busy buying things, displaying wealth, maintaining an image, that I forgot what actually matters. I forgot that the best things in life aren't things at all. It wasn't perfect. It didn't erase 4 years of pain. But it was real. And it was a start. Richard followed a week later. His apology was stiffer, more awkward. He wasn't good with emotions. But he acknowledged his part in the favoritism, in the judgment, in treating David and me like we were less important than Jake and Sarah. I thought I was teaching you to be independent, he said to David. But really, I was just being cheap and calling it parenting. We set boundaries. Real ones. Family dinners once a month, not every week. No more comments about money, lifestyle, or choices. No more comparing us to Jake and Sarah. And most importantly, respect. Non-negotiable, unwavering respect for me, for David, for our choices as parents. It's been 2 years since that party. Lily is 3 now, and she's thriving. She's smart, curious, funny, and kind. She loves books, just like my parents did. She asks a million questions about everything. She's obsessed with dinosaurs and refuses to wear anything that isn't purple. She's perfect. The trust fund continues to grow. David and I contribute to it when we can, not much, but every little bit helps. Last time I checked with our financial advisor, it was valued at $310,000. On track to hit 600,000 by the time Lily's 18. Maybe more if the market continues performing well. And my in-laws? They're trying. They're genuinely trying. Margaret babysits now, actually babysits, not just poses for photos. She gets on the floor and plays with Lily. She reads to her. She's learning to be a grandmother instead of performing the role. Richard taught Lily how to water his garden last summer. He built her a small raised bed where she's growing tomatoes and strawberries. He's awkward with emotions, but he shows up. Consistently. They're not perfect. They still slip sometimes. Margaret still makes comments occasionally that carry echoes of the old judgment. Richard still talks about money more than I'd like. But they catch themselves now. They apologize. They're learning. Sarah and I will never be close. That ship sailed a long time ago. But she did apologize eventually in her own way. A text message 6 months after the party that said, "I was wrong about you. You're a good mom." Lily's lucky. Coming from her, that was something. Jake and David rebuilt their relationship slowly. They'll never be as close as they were as kids, but they're brothers. They're finding their way. Last week, Lily asked me about the wooden box that sits on her bookshelf. "What's in there, Mommy?" "A promise," I told her. "What kind of promise?" "A promise that you can be anything you want to be. A promise that your dreams matter. A promise that your great-grandparents, people you never met but who loved you anyway, believed in you before you were even born." She didn't fully understand. She's 3. But someday she will. Someday she'll read the letter I wrote her. She'll understand the sacrifice my parents made, working for decades and saving every penny. She'll understand the choice I made to pass their legacy forward instead of using it for myself. She'll understand that love isn't measured in designer toys or expensive parties. Looking back on that day, standing in that room full of people who'd spent years making me feel small, I realized something powerful. Worth isn't measured by the size of your house or the label in your clothes or the number in your bank account. It's measured by what you build for the people you love, what you sacrifice, what you leave behind. My parents left me more than money. They left me values. They left me integrity. They left me a belief in the power of education, of knowledge, of creating opportunities for the next generation. And I'm passing those values on to Lily, along with the financial security to chase whatever dreams she develops. That simple wooden box on Lily's first birthday contained more than a trust fund. It contained a promise that transcended generations. A promise that she would never be judged for where she came from. A promise that her future would be built on love and sacrifice, not status and performance. A promise that her worth would never be questioned by anyone, least of all her own family. And when those people mocked my gift, when they laughed at the simple wrapping and the modest presentation, they had no idea they were laughing at the most valuable thing in that room. They had no idea that the quiet girl from the working-class family, the girl they dismissed and judged for years, had just secured her daughter's future while they were busy performing for a photographer. Sometimes the most powerful gifts come in the simplest packages. Sometimes the greatest love is shown not in what you buy, but in what you give up. And sometimes, the people who judge you the most are the ones who understand value the least. Lily starts preschool next fall. She's already reading simple words. She loves learning. She asks me to teach her new things every day. And when I look at her, I see my mom's eyes, bright and curious. I see my dad's determination. I see a future full of infinite possibility. And I know, without a single doubt, that the gift I gave her that day, the gift my parents gave through me, will change her life in ways a $1,200 toy car never could. It'll give her freedom. It'll give her choices. It'll give her the ability to pursue her passion instead of just pursuing a paycheck. That's real wealth. That's real legacy. And no amount of money in the world can buy that. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been made to feel like you're not enough, like you don't measure up, like you don't belong because you didn't come from money, I want you to remember this. True wealth isn't what you have. It's what you give. It's what you build. It's the legacy you leave for the people who come after you. Hit that like button if you believe love is worth more than luxury. Drop a